Hello everyone and welcome to a very nice game from the US Chess Championship. This is round 3 and we have a nice game between Robson and Abhimanyu Mishra. You guys requested some games by Mishra as you know, he is the youngest Grandmaster to ever become a Grandmaster. He overtook Sergei Karyakin's record and he became a Grandmaster at the age of 12 years, 4 months and 25 days. And he mentioned on several occasions that he would very much enjoy becoming the youngest world champion ever as well. How is he doing? Let's check it out. Like I said, the first game we're going to check is against Robson, and this is from round 3, and then we're going to check out the game from round 4. So it's the US Championship last year. The winner was Fabiana Caruana, who is, I'm not going to spoil it. We're going to talk about it after we show the games. But yeah, it's an hour and a half for the first 40 moves, and then you get additional times. I think you get like 30 minutes for the rest of the game, and there's a 30 seconds increment starting from move 1. So not for move 60, which I prefer, but you actually get increment from move 1. So that being said, let's check it out. So this is a really theory packed game. There are like 20 moves of known theory, so we're gonna skip most of the game. So Ray opens with d4. We have pawn to d5, c4, c6, going for the Slav defense. We have knight to f3, knight to f6, and now knight to c3. We have e6, going for the semi-Slav formation, g3, and d captures on c4. So nothing new here, all been played before. Bishop g2, not b5 right away, but first knight b to d7. We have castles, and now pawn to b5. We have pawn to e4, and now bishop to b7. You could also go for pawn to b4, but it's not really anything spectacular. White will play pawn to e5, and when you move your knight, white will move his knight. So it can be played, and it has been played. Bishop to b7 is just a bit more common. So bishop b7, we have pawn to e5, knight to d5, and now knight to g5. If you go knight e4, black will just move take away the g5 square from the knight. So here, Robson goes for it right away, and now pawn to h6. And what do you think Robson played here? He played knight captures on e6. So it's a piece sacrifice, but a very well-known one for those of you who are into the semi-Slav. F captures on e6, queen to h5 with check, king to e7, and now knight to e4. We have queen to e8, of course, trying to exchange queens, and now bishop to g5 with check. And now h captures on g5 is the top move here. Everyone plays it, but there is one game Anand played it against, Vladimir Kramnik played it against Vishwanathan Anand. Kramnik had the white pieces here, and in that game, after bishop to g5 check, Anand actually played knight to f6, and the game continued by pretty much getting everything traded off. He captures, g captures, bishop captures, knight captures, now defending the queen, queen captures, knight captures, and you had the same game, 2 bishops against the knight and bishop. Their game ended in a draw, but pretty much all the other games continue. H captures on g5, as does this one here. Queen captures on h8, now grabbing the rook, king to d8, trying to hide your king, and now comes knight captures on g5. Lalit Babu had this position against Ding Liren also in 2015, as obviously the variation was quite popular in 2015, and he played queen to g8, but he lost that game. Interestingly, queen to g8 is the second move, second or the third top move recommended by the engine, but obviously not good enough against Ding. So knight captures on g5, queen to e7 now attacking the knight, and queen to h5 defending. We have king to c7, and now there are a couple of games where rook a to e1 was played, but here we have queen to g6, and it is now as of move 18 that we have a completely new game. So this is now completely new territory for us, but as it would seem not for the players, because here in this position before queen to g6, I actually allowed the engine to crunch the numbers to like maybe depth 50, and the engine says, yeah, just play queen to g6, play a4, play rook a3, play rook f3, and bring the rook over to f7. So that's the engine's plan, and that's the exact plan that Robson went for. So queen to g6, we have rook to e8. Now you have to also, queen to g6 comes with tempo as you now put pressure on the e6 pawn. So rook to e8, and now pawn to a4, making room for rook to a3. And if you go for pawn to b4, while you stop rook to a3, you do weaken your position a little bit, then the c file might become become problematic, and also the knight can jump to f7 right away. You can go to d6, put pressure on c4, so not the best. So after a4, we have king to b8, and now rook to a3, preparing the maneuver that we just discussed. Knight to c7, adding more defense to the e6 pawn, so now the queen can move. And now rook to f3. We have b captures on a4, and now pawn to h4. The pawn now marches forward, queen to d8, and now rook to f7. So, okay, the queen moved, but you are defending your pawn with the knight and the rook. So rook to e7, offering a rook trade, and now rook back to f4. And now, of course, you realize why white does not want to trade. Robson wants to improve his position as much as possible and try to get those pawns all the way up the board. g5 and h6, once they are played, he should have definite compensation for the sacrificed material. But here, if he just trades down, and that is what Mishra, of course, is going for, then look at this a4 and c4 pawns. If imagine all of the pieces just traded down, and we go into a king and pawn endgame. What will happen? Well, Mishra will play c3, b captures on c3, and the a pawn wins the game. So of course you know that if everything gets traded off the board and the white king is still on the king side, it's completely winning for black. So that will be his plan. And of course Robson wants to keep material on the board. Rook f4, we have queen to e8, offering a queen trade. Queen to h7 now, and here you should play knight to d5, but g6 was played in the game, and this sort of allows Ray to win the g6 pawn. He just has to play knight to f7 and next pick up the pawn here. Point is that there's no way for black to do anything. If knight b6, queen captures on g6, now the knight comes to d5, attacks the rook here, bishop captures on d5. You will give up your bishop, and after he captures, you will play rook f6, and you will start advancing your passed h pawn. So that's the best way for white to play. However, he played rook to f7 instead, but now it's different. Now the rook can actually move from e7, the rooks can get traded off, and it's not as potent, even though you will win the g6 pawn. So pawn to c5 offers a trade of bishops and also threatens c captures on d4. We have bishop captures on b7, king captures, and now queen captures on g6. So the passed pawn has been created, and also the passed g pawn is now available too. Rook captures, we have knight captures, and c captures on d4. Now Mishra also has a passed d pawn. Queen to e4 with check, nicely connecting with the d4 pawn, and now knight to d5. We have knight to d6, also trading knight for bishop. Bishop captures, pawn captures, and now queen to ah, guarding the d4 pawn. Rook to d1, attacking the pawn, and now defending with a tactic, knight to e5. And now the problem is you cannot touch the pawn. Of course, if queen captures, knight f3 check, picks up the queen, and if rook captures, you still play knight f3 check. You give up the knight, and then you pick up the rook here, and you're just up a full piece. Yes, okay, there's the g and h pawn, but a full piece. I mean, we already discussed c3, and the a pawn marches forward. So after knight to e5, we have pawn to d7, trading off the passed d pawn for the passed d4 pawn. Knight captures on d7, queen captures on d4, queen captures, and rook captures. So now it's a rook against two knights, but now comes the move that we've discussed. But which move do you think it is? Feel free to pause the video and win the game for Abhimanyu while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on not touching the c pawn, and for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is pawn to a3. That's the move. It may be counterintuitive a little bit because you want to have the outside, sorry about that, you want to have the outside pass pawn, but here it wouldn't work. If you played c3 first, then b captures a3, you can just play rook to a4, and there's no good way to defend your pawn here. So instead, pawn to a3 was played, and now b captures on a3. If you go rook captures on c4, then just a captures on b2. The knight covers the b4 square, the pawn covers the c1 square, so next move, black is getting a queen. So after a3, he has to play b captures on a3, now pawn to c3, where the c3 pawn is now nicely defended by the knight. We have rook to d1, knight to c5, now pawn to h5. Now, of course, Ray would also like to advance his pawn as much, as close to the h square as possible, and Mishra has to decide, does he have to block that, or can he actually go for the attack and finish the game right away? And he calculates precisely. He plays knight to d3. Of course, the knight is off limits. You're just gonna push the pawn, and there's no way for the rook to defend, as the c3 and d1 squares are now covered. So after knight d3, h6, Ray starts advancing his pass pawn c2, rook to f1, and now knight to f6. A very important move, guarding the h7 square. g4, and now not just winning the rook, but first knight to h7. Stop the expansion of white's kingside pawns. King to g2, and now c1, bringing a queen into the game. Rook captures, knight captures, and now pawn to f4. So of course, Ray will still try to advance those pawns and fight against the knight, but the king and two knights are just too powerful. King c6, we have king to f3, king to d5, and now pawn to g5. We have knight to f8, guarding g6 and h7, king to g4, and now knight to d3. So two knights are simply too much. We have pawn to f5, captures, not captures, first knight to e5 with check, king to f4, and now knight g to f6 with check. Well, you don't have to give up the knight. Here Abhimanyu just says that he doesn't want to it's you might make a mistake here, and this is just winning by force, so you don't have to calculate anything. So that's why he played it. Captures with check, king to g4, and now of course king to e4. We have pawn to a4, pawn to a5, and now forcing the king. Well, first to h7, king to e5, and now king to h5. King to f5, and here we have king to h6 and pawn to e5, and it was in this position on move 56 that Ray Robson resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. Once you win the knight, king g7, e4 is just winning. Of course, you will win the knight, captures, and just pawn to e3. If you move the king closer, then we pick up the pawn, and if you push the pawn, you can also just pick up the pawn and next promote your pawn to a queen. So excellent game with the black pieces by Abhimanyu Mishra, who I mean, you've seen how much theory the two of them had gone through, even with this queen to g6 move that Robson prepared, which was the absolute top engine move, and the entire plan was the absolute top engine plan. Mishra survives, and he ends up on top. So yeah, there was that one moment where he could have maybe went for the move that we discussed once all of this was played, not rook to f7, but instead knight to f7, which would allow him to have the upper hand, but once he missed that, it was all Abhimanyu. So this is a game from round 3, and in round 4, Mishra faced none other than Hans Niemann, so we're going to check out that game as well. In this game, Abhimanyu had the white pieces. So, of course, you all know Hans. Let's check it out and see what happened here. If he wins this one, then Abhi will definitely be a contender to actually win the tournament. So, pawn to e4, and Hans goes for the Sicilian defense. We have pawn to c5, knight f3, knight to c6, and now bishop to b5. Here, I always like to mention b4, my favorite line for bullet and blitz. You will win many games if you learn this line. Very cool, and very few people know how to play it against black, but it's not great for classical. It's like the 11th most popular continuation, but people still do play it. Bishop to b5, the so-called Nesmedino Rosolimo attack. We have pawn to g6, and now castles. We have bishop to g7, c3, and now knight to f6. So this game also fully packed with known theory. Rook to e1, we have castles, and now pawn to d4. We have pawn to d5 by Hans, e5, and knight to e4. Again, everything been seen before. Bishop captures, we have b captures, and bishop to e3. Queen to b6, now putting pressure on the b2 pawn, and queen to c1. We have pawn to c4, Hans logs the position, and knight b to d2, offering a trade of knights. We have knight captures, and now we have bishop to f5, nicely developing, preparing to put the bishop on d3. We have pawn to b3, and now bishop to d3. We have pawn to h4, and now there are a couple of games that reach this position, and I even allowed the engine to crunch the numbers also to depth 50, because I wanted to see how much the players were within their preparation. And a5 is a known move here, and a5 is the top move recommended by the engine. But here we have pawn to h5, which is not even in the top 3, so this is, I guess, maybe something Hans came up with over the board, or maybe it's like maybe the 7th engine suggestion, but it's also just very strong. So that there you have it. So it is now as of move 15 that we have a completely new game. So bishop to g5, putting pressure on the e7 pawn, and while you could defend this with pawn to e6, you will also, as you plan to capture here, and then pawn captures, you will free up the e4 square for the knight, you will weaken these two squares. So for the moment, the pawn should remain on e7. So rook f to e8, we have b captures on c4, d captures on c4, and now knight to e4. And this is now a great knight preparing to become a monster knight with knight c5, and also if this gets played, then black's position just gets destroyed, so it's better just to gobble up that knight. Bishop captured. Even though your bishop is strong on d3, the potential of this knight to become even more powerful is definitely there, so it's good that he traded it. Bishop captures, rook captures, and now rook a to b8, gaining control over the b file. So rook e2, not allowing the queen to come to b2, and we have queen to a5 now, honing in on white's weaknesses, the a2 and c3 pawns, queen to e3, and now queen to d5, nicely centralizing the queen. Rook a to e1, tripling up on the e file, and queen to e6 now. We have queen to e4, Abhimanyu also centralizes his queen, and now rook to b5. Pawn to f3, as it's pawn to f3 is a useful move, but it's very hard to find a way how to actually make progress in this position. So queen to d5, Hans offers a queen trade. He would very much like to undouble his pawns, but Abhimanyu, of course, declines this. Queen to f4, and now c5. Yeah, you have a doubled pawn. Abhimanyu has a beautiful pawn center here. It's time to trade a pawn for pawn and weaken it a little bit. And while you would definitely enjoy keeping the center, like let's say you play something like king to f1 and allow this, then once the rook comes to c8, you will have to fight against this passed c pawn. Maybe a little bit too much to allow black. So instead, d captures on c5 was played. Queen captures on c5 with check, and queen to e3. Now Abhi offers a queen trade, rook to c8, and now we have queen captures on c5. Rook c captures on c5, also now putting pressure on this e5 pawn. And the problem is, if you play f4 here, believe it or not, this is already lost for white. You put your bishop out of the game, and there's just no good way to get it back into the game. So here Abhimanyu figures out a different plan. He plays pawn to e6, and now he will ruin Hans's pawn structure and also just go into a very nice endgame. So f captures on e6, we have rook to e4 now, and bishop captures on c3. But now you start recollecting, rook to c1 attacks the bishop, bishop to e5, and rook e captures on c4. We have captures, and bishop to g3 now. Controlling f2 and h2, now preparing rook to b1 with check. But of course, Abhimanyu will not allow that. King to f1, and now rook to b1 with check. And now, in order to really play this to the fullest, you have to play king to e2. It's an ugly move to play, but you have to play it. And this, I will just show it because it's the best move. Rook to b2 check, king d3, now you collect on a2, now you collect on e7, and now rook captures on g2. So you are down 2 pawns, but you will win at least one of them. No, you will win one of them back at least, and then probably more. For example, if rook to a4, you put pressure on this pawn, rook h2 puts pressure on this pawn, but you are defending it for the moment, so you don't really have to worry. Best just to improve your position. Bishop g5, and if bishop f2 guarding this pawn, it doesn't matter. You will go after this pawn. You will win one of them. And if king to f7, just rook to f4 check, and you have a draw. The king now has to move back, king to g7, or king back to g8. You will repeat rook to e4, because if you go up the board, then rook to f6 will again go after the e6 and g6 pawns, and this is where you find sufficient counterplay to actually hold this position. But bishop to c1 was played, and this allows Hans to grab too much of the position. Rook to a1 attacks the pawn here, pawn to a4, and now bishop captures on h4. Now if rook captures on c1, and you're just going to be down too many pawns in a rook and pawn endgame. So king to e2, rook to a2 with check, bishop to d2, and now bishop to g5, threatening to win the bishop here. So pawn to f4, you have to play it, and now bishop back to h6. We have king to d3, and now pawn to e5. Again, f captures on e5 impossible because of rook captures on d2. So pawn to g3, we have e captures, g captures, and now again pawn to e5. So nicely getting rid of the doubled e pawn. Rook to c8 with check, king to f7, and now rook to c7 with check. We have king to e6 and rook captures on a7, keeping the passed a pawn. E captures on f4, and now rook to a6 with check. The king has to defend on g6, so rook to a5 with check, king to g4, and rook to a6. We have pawn to h4. There is no stopping the pawns now. You are up 2 pawns, and you're, well, white's pieces are just too far away to stop them. Rook captures on g6 played with check, but it doesn't matter. Bishop to g5. We have bishop to b4. Sorry, not bishop to c3. Bishop to b4, even preparing bishop to e7 to win the bishop on g5. But Hans shows that it doesn't matter. Just pawn to f3. Bishop to c5. If you go after the bishop, it doesn't matter. Just pawn to f2, and the pawn is now unstoppable. The king cannot cross the second rank. And once you capture, just king to f4, and now you don't have a rook to g1. You don't have king to rook to f5. f1 will queen on the next move, and that's pretty much it. Similar is what happened in the game. Bishop to c5 was played. But it doesn't really matter. Now comes pawn to h3, bishop to e7, and now pawn to f2. So with the inclusion of one move, rook captures on g5, king to f4, and he was in this position on move 53 that Abhimanyu Mishra resigned the game, and a very nice victory for Hans Niemann in round 4 of this year's US Chess Championship. So Abhimanyu had a playable position, but you've seen how difficult the position was. It was like every move you could make, not one, but 10 mistakes. So both for him and Hans, it was a really complicated position. And Hans emerged victorious from it. And these are the standings. Let me just load this up after 4 rounds have been played. So the leader is last year's winner, Fabiano Caruana. If you guys want to see any of his games, do also use #suggestion. I might even show them, even if you guys don't ask me anything, but probably after 5th round is played. Then in second place, sharing with 2.5 out of 4, Hans Niemann and Sam Shankland and Abhimanyu Mishra. 2.5 out of 4, 2 out of 4, Dominguez Perez Lenier, Wesley So, Samuel Sevian, Levon Aronian with 1.5 points, Andrew Tang, Jeffrey Xiong, Darius Schwerch, and in last place with 1 point out of 4, Ray Robson. Although hard to imagine, but it's a strong tournament. Anyone can beat anyone. And it will be interesting what happens in the end. But Fabi, you know, solid as a rock, as usual. We'll see if anyone will be able to grab a full point from him. So yeah, that's the game, or rather those were the games. Hope you guys enjoyed that. If you have any other favorites, like I said, do use #suggestion. I will do my best to cover them. I would like to wish a very happy birthday to Audrius, and I would like to thank Mr. Hoodie Guy, the Brewers on Spotify, Petra Marinov, and an anonymous person for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day. And probably I will show my game from the Croatian Chess League next. So, you know, stay tuned for that. See you soon.